What's in our worldview that makes us say this is that we don't think it's okay for human beings to own other human beings as property that they can pass on to their children. Do you think that's
Okay.
okay?
Didn't the verse says that the slave has to say yes, they want to stay with their masters?
No,
No,
they do
For the,
not
no.
say that. Let's do a little lesson on
yes, it
biblical
did. It did.
slavery, shall
Actually,
we?
I read that passage. Do you want me to read the
No,
passage
let's
for you
have a
where it says
little
it?
listen on biblical slavery. So, as for the male and female slaves who you may have, it's from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also acquire them from among the aliens residing with you and from their families who are with you, who have been born in your land. They may be your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property. These you may treat as slaves, but your fellow Israelites, no one shall rule over the other with harshness. Now, there's nothing in there about asking their permission, right? You don't have to
Oh,
ask their permission. They're people who
You
you
literally buy them.
who you buy from someone else who owns them, who sells them to you like they might sell you a wagon to attach to a horse, right? It's a
uh,
property.
ex- can I respond? In Exodus, it says that nobody can kidnap a person. Do you know
We're not. We're not
Yeah,
talking
well,
about kidnapping. These are not kidnapping people.
Okay, you
These
know
are
what?
buying
Can I
slaves.
finish?
These are
Can I finish?
buying slaves.
Can I
No,
finish?
you can't because this has
No, I
nothing to
can't
if
do
you
finish.
with.
address
I can't finish.
this
I'm
passage,
addressing the whole Bible in context. Can I finish? Question?
I'm going to give you a room to say whatever you want, but I want to finish making this point first.
Okay, go ahead.
That if you want to speak about kidnapping, you're talking about a different subject. There are verses in there
It's not.
about not
It's not.
about not kidnapping, but kidnapping was not the only means by which you could acquire slaves. For example, another means by which you could acquire slaves is here. When you draw near to a town to fight against it, offer it terms of peace. If it accepts your terms of peace and surrenders to you, then all the people in it shall serve you at forced labor. That's a way of legitimizing the acquisition of slaves without kidnapping. So you can speak about kidnapping if you want, but that's a completely different subject. Why would you want to change subject? We haven't finished with this one yet.
Okay, can I finish? Can I respond now? Yeah. So the verse about not just kidnapping, or maybe you don't know the definition of kidnapping, is taking somebody without their consent. Well, the verse is very strict here. Even it says somebody was kidnapped in another country and you were to buy it, that's still gonna be illegal when it comes to. It's still gonna be considered a sin when it comes to the Exodus passage, which means that the person has to be knowledge. And this verse in this Deuteronomy that you present to me about the people that's being served labor, it never says or indicate that they're gonna serve for life. That's something
it
completely
literally
different.
says it.
Can I finish? Can I finish? Oh my
Not,
god.
not
I
if not
cannot.
if you're lying. Not if you're
Can
lying.
I finish
Hold
and then
on.
you respond? I believe you guys lied too. Did
He
I
just
lie
showed.
to
He
them?
literally put it up on the
I
screen
disagree with
and
the
read it to you.
interpretation, so I think that's a lie. All right. So
You
can
think
I
the Bible's
finish?
a lie? Wonderful.
I know.
Okay.
I don't believe your interpretation of it is
Okay, hold on, hold on. Let's get
Words.
into interpretation. Let's get into interpretation. So we'll go over this again. As for your male and female slaves, whom you may have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. Okay, so let's go line by line. What is that saying there?
The word is ebed, which means man worker. So I want you to use it correctly instead of using the King James translation.
What? So okay, so you
The
can buy.
word and the
So
Hebrew is ebed, which means man worker. Can you use it in the correct way translation instead of the word slave?
okay. So you may keep them as possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property.
Uh-huh.
What is that?
Uh-huh.
What is that saying there?
Yeah, so that's talking about another verse. The one in the Deuteronomy which you showed me was talking about the specific verse for when people attack the nation or you attack another nation, you can have them serve as a labor. There's one concept for this slave. Those slaves are not said to be staying there for a long time like those other ones. But I'm gonna go back for the slave for the thing in Leviticus where it does says that the slave has to say yes. Let me get this verse real
You're
quick.
just making shit up, dude. That's complete nonsense. The verse in Deuteronomy is from the laws about how Israel can conquer towns and cities outside of the promised land, right? Not the Canaanites inside it, who all had to be put to death with no possibility of being enslaved. I really don't. You're just pulling stuff out your backside. I'm so sorry, but that is
I'm
what's
gonna get the
happening here.
verse. I'm gonna get the verse. Give me a second. Don't worry about it. Give me a second.
Okay, you're going to go and get a verse. The point was
Yeah.
that we started off talking about God's moral character, right? Let's just ground ourselves here because we're 13 minutes into the call, right? And we've wasted a load of time. We're talking about God's moral character. And one of the instances, one of many, one of maybe 20 that we could have picked of an example of where God's moral character is lacking is his endorsement and instruction of slavery. So we presented this to you, and you said, but they're not allowed to kidnap people. So I gave you an example of one way of acquiring slaves which didn't involve kidnapping. Another way of acquiring slaves which didn't involve kidnapping is to legitimately buy them, right? Because there was a free trade. There was a trade. Because there was a trade. There were no commandments from God there were no commandments from God to the Israelites against buying slaves, which is why he gave them specific instructions on exactly how to do it. When he said,
Show us a verse where it says don't buy slaves.
it's BS.
Not necessarily in the way you say phrasing it.
You may acquire them.
So it says it.
Let me know when you guys done so I can respond.
Okay, well, I'm almost done. So I'm saying that you saying they're not allowed to kidnap people is actually a complete non sequitur with regard to the practice of slavery, which is fully endorsed in the Bible by God and also by Jesus, and also in the New Testament by Paul and by Peter. So if you're really going to make an argument that the Bible is against slavery, you've got a big mountain to climb. Now you can say what you want to say.
Okay, good. Exodus 21 verse 5 clearly says that the slave has to declare to the master that I want to stay with you and I don't want to go free, including his sons, in order for it to be passed down.
Which verse?
Exodus 21 verse 5. Another passage again.
Hold on. Let's go one at a time.
Let's have a look.
I think he's talking about the one where it's a way to trick your Israelite slave instead of letting him go after 6 years.
That's about Israelite slaves.
You give him a wife, so now he has to either split up with his family or decide to stay with you for life. So you kind of threaten him by
Nicodemus. There's a massive point here that you're missing, and if you're a Christian, you need to know this. Okay, I said to you that there are two different types of slaves under the Israelite law, under these Mosaic laws. There is a distinction which you are ignoring, but is massively consequential. And that is the difference between fellow Israelites working off a debt under the indentured servitude laws, of which Exodus 21:5 is one. And there are laws and regulations there whereby that slave can go free after 6 years if they are a man. But if they're a woman, they can't. And if that man has had any children or a wife during that period of servitude, they're not free to go either, which is a way of coercing him into staying. But those laws apply to fellow Israelites. Okay? Do you understand this?
Can I respond?
I want a yes or a no.
Do you understand it?
No, I don't.
You don't understand. Okay, I'll say it again for you. So there's a set of slavery laws.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't agree with your interpretation.
Well, it's not my interpretation. It just happens to be a fact.
Are you acknowledging that there are separate rules for Israelite slaves versus foreign slaves? Yes or no?
Not certainly when it comes to key morality. No.
Sean has pointed out to you exactly the right thing here, which is that the verse you were talking about starts off with, when you buy a male Hebrew slave. Those words aren't minor details. Those words are major details. They signify that this is a person from among the Hebrews who enjoys rights that the people from outside the Hebrews don't enjoy. Now, if you're not going to grant that, then this is not the place for you. You need to go and do some studying, do some learning, and come back when you've learned to read your book. Because this is not a false dichotomy or a matter of interpretation. It's what the text says.
One question. Is my interpretation aligned with the one of the church instead of yours?
There's no one in the church who's going to deny that Exodus 21:2-5 relates to the treatment of Hebrew slaves. You literally had us wait while you went off to get a verse to show us the conditions under which slaves had more rights than we were saying they had. You did that, and we waited patiently for you to come back, and the verse you came back with was Exodus 21:5. When I then pointed out that that verse relates to Hebrew slaves, male male
Prove it's
Hebrew
only Hebrew.
slaves.
Prove it's
Hang on.
only Hebrew.
Sorry?
Prove that. Show us where it says
Okay.
it's only to
I
Hebrew
will.
slave.
Okay. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but in the 7th he shall go out free without debt. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. That was the verse I alluded to where the man is basically forced to stay. And then the one you wanted was, but if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out a free person, because he's not willing to leave his family there behind because he was coerced into staying by the master. Now, you went hunting for this. Would you please read me the first line of verse 2?
Where does it say only Hebrew slave? Only. I want to say only.
When you buy a male or Hebrew
It
slave.
doesn't say only now.
Wow.
When
If
you
it applied
buy,
to everyone, why would they say male Hebrew slave? Why would they
right?
be with that much specificity?
Yeah, there you go. So your argument is because it says when you
says,
buy
so
only a male Hebrew
So
slave.
it
Do
doesn't
you know
say
that's
only male
ridiculous?
slave. It
That's
says when you buy
ridiculous.
a male slave. Well, can I finish? You call it ridiculous. That's an appeal to stone fallacy. But anyways,
Oh Lord.
when you're gonna say you buy a male Hebrew slave, you shall sell for 3 years, blah blah blah, and all
Okay.
that. But he says that in order for you to keep a slave, never said only a Hebrew slave. It says that the slave has to declare. It never said the Hebrew slave has to declare. He said the slave has to declare that I love my master and my wife, and I will not give.
Hold on.
He
If I
never
say
said
if you
Hebrew
buy
here. But is a conjunctions, right? So when you say but, if the slave, he never says only the Hebrew slave. He said if the slave declares that I love my master, then the slave can stay. They're
so
talking
because it
about this
doesn't say male Hebrew slave, it
and that
specified.
passage. Yes.
All right. Yeah, I can explain why you're wrong. Like
Sure.
if I put a manual that said or some type of automotive notice to say if you buy a 1998 Ford Mustang, you must change the oil every 300 miles or excuse me 3,000 miles, etc. In your car, you should only use whatever weight oil, blah blah blah. But do I have to say your 1998 Ford Mustang vehicle every single time, or can I shorthand because I already outlined in the beginning of this of the paragraph who I'm talking to or what I'm talking about? Do I have to say 1998 Ford Mustang every single time? Like when I say when you got to lift the oil cap, do I have to say of your 1998
That's such a
Ford
good
Mustang?
argument.
In your context, no,
That's such a good
but in the
argument.
Bible context, when they give blacks such as laws and moral laws, it applies to everybody.
All right. I have to tell you two things. So the first is that you win the gold medal for wishful thinking and language gymnastics. I love that. Thank you for
Call it
entertaining us with
language
that.
gymnastics, but I'm still
Yeah,
justified.
of course. The second one is that
Sure.
having reached the 28-minute mark, we did put a vote to the room about whether they want us to continue this. I was going to say conversation, but it isn't really a conversation, but continue this exchange, or whether they would like us to move on now. And the room has requested that we move on. You haven't made a case that
You don't look
that's.
in the assertion. I don't need to make
Do you
a
mind?
case.
Do you mind if I speak on my own life? Thank you. You haven't made a case that slavery was not condoned by the Bible. You've literally just pointed to a verse which characterizes the requirements for a different type of slavery, which we're not doubting. So if you had spent the time speaking about the conditions for non-Israelite slaves, we would have been able to get into the detail that actually was relevant to the discussion. But instead, we went off on a ridiculous tangent, which I suspect is why the
It
room
wouldn't be a tangent. I grant you the
is
interpretation.
requesting that we move on. So we are going to do that. But thanks for coming in to speak to us anyway. It was fun. It was fun. One of the funnier conversations I've had in a while.